Tonight, a new documentary premieres on MSNBC, King of the Apocalypse. It dives into the life of Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes, who was sentenced in May of 2023 to 18 years in prison for seditious conspiracy for plotting the violence ahead of the January 6th attack. Donald Trump commuted Rhodes' sentence on his first day back in office. The film features estranged members of Rhodes' family who have since become de-radicalized. Here's Rhodes' son explaining why his own father went down this path.
Time Oath Keepers appeared, the U.S. had spent the last 6 years fighting wars which many troops on the ground felt were unwinnable or unjustified. Many of these ex-military guys said the same thing. The government had let them down, and it could not be trusted. So Stewart's calls to respect the oath spoke loudly to them.
Joining us now is Rhodes' ex-wife, Tasha Adams.
Tasha, thank you so much for being with us. You know, you said before the election you feared for your safety if your ex-husband were to receive a pardon. He is now out of prison. Does this fear persist? What is life like for you now?
Well, I guess it's like living life very carefully, but we were used to that for a really long time. You know, we lived in a lot of fear of his mood swings and his how he felt that day, and it's a little different now. Of course, we're living far away, and hopefully it stays that way. But you know, it was such a difficult time period to see him finally put away and to work toward that and to look for this day of freedom where we felt secure and safe again, and that was very short-lived.
Ms. Adams, talk to us about what it was like for you and your son to be caught up in this world, this vortex of, you know, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, and the struggle for you to extricate yourself. You know, folks talk about being de-radicalized, but that's just a one-off term. There's a process. There's a very personal journey that takes place there. Talk about that environment and that move away from it.
I mean, you know, in some ways, at least for me, a lot of being in the movement was really more about, you know, we're in the house and this is what Stewart's doing, and helping Stewart with this makes him happy with us, or what, you know, it's our everyday life. It's all we know. But at the same time, there really was a de-radicalization that I don't talk about a lot. And that is the people in that movement were the only people we were allowed to associate with. Mm-hmm. And so it was sort of like leaving a cult. It was like leaving a tribe. It wasn't just walking away from, you know, a marriage and a life. It was also leaving behind every relationship we had. It was leaving behind a self-identity. It was a lot. And I actually was so focused on getting out of the marriage, I was sort of blindsided by the other side of it. But, you know, that, we don't even know a soul anymore. I mean, it was like a remaking, really. And some of it, the mentally took years.
You know, it's so interesting to hear you say that, because I think there are a lot of folks who are maybe watching this and who will watch the documentary tonight that just can't understand how people get caught up into a cult or a group like this. And it is really important, I think, to just drive home and underscore that our circles and our worlds are actually so small. And as you said, like you were like, this is what my husband is doing, so I'm gonna help my husband. You know, these are our friends that we associate with. Not understanding that you were being indoctrinated in the process, and then it was the breakup of your marriage that caused you to also come out and say, oh.
Yeah. And you know, another thing I thought was really important, and I'm really glad, and I think that the film does this, is I wanted Stewart Rhodes to be seen as something other than a Disney villain. I mean, he's got the black cowboy hat and the eye patch, and it is the look. I mean, it looks like a bad guy, and like, well, why didn't you leave sooner? How did you not know he was evil? Look at him. But I wanted people, I mean, I just handed over boxes of film and and memory cards that I had no idea what was on, and just gave them to the film crew and said, just stuff I'd never even seen before. Just look through it, because I wanted people to see what he looked like as a college student. And, evil doesn't always present, with a black eye patch and a cowboy hat.
You wrote a piece for MSNBC that is out today, and you write, if there is one useful lesson I learned from 30 years with someone like Stewart Rhodes, it's that false promises and the smoke and mirrors magic tricks to woo crowds are not something that can last. Real change requires more than just an emotional surge. Without substance, the fervor always ends eventually. And even the most skilled of flim-flam men lose the faith of the crowd when the house lights click back on. I suspect you are not only talking about Stewart Rhodes in that piece.
That is very true. And the similarities between Stewart and Donald Trump were so obvious that this was actually a huge part of what helped de-radicalize my son, was realizing, my God, that the patterns are the same. People with this type of, potentially personality disorder sort of behave in these same ways, and they never really have, they don't have truth on their side. And so there cannot be any substance to what they're saying. It's always just glitter and glitz and, don't you feel good while I'm talking, and that's all there ever is to it.
Yeah, let's listen a little bit to your son on the extremist dad.
We would play a game where we'd be trying to train in situational awareness. So he would step back and disappear while we were in a grocery store, and then circle around and see if he could sneak up on me, and then lunge out from behind a shelf and scream stab, 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 and pantomime shanking me. And everybody would look and be like, what the was that?
That says a lot. I mean, that carried over into so much of the family's everyday life. So there really was no escape from it.
No, there really wasn't. Every day was, even if you wanted to just do some idle activity, you had to show that somehow it was useful to a form of violence. That's just, the kids that were allowed to do sports, but only if it was, jiu-jitsu or boxing or, knife skills. That's really all they were allowed to do. And that was under heavy, heavy, heavy supervision from Stewart being there, making sure the kids aren't, getting too comfortable talking with a coach or any outsider influence whatsoever. But those were the only types of things we were allowed to do. And it was just every day. And it sounds crazy now to even hear it, but that wasn't anywhere near the craziest type of thing that we did in that lifestyle. He was training my 7-year-olds carried knives. And knew how to use them. And it was just insanity. It was insanity. And that's just how we lived. And we were just so immersed in it. And everybody we had contact with was also so immersed in it that it was hard to remember what reality looked like.
Tasha,
that's what a cult does.
Real quick before we go to break, your top piece of advice for someone who has a loved one they fear needs to be de-radicalized?
Don't give up on them. Don't give up on them, because people can come out of this. Sometimes just finding one little piece of common ground and showing it to them and personalizing the other side. The other side of politics has been severely otherized to people on the other side, and just to humanize it somewhat, I think could be the real key. And then just don't give up on them.
Tasha Adams, I admire your bravery, your deep well of empathy. Thank you so much for being with us on this program.
Thanks for having me.
You can watch King of the Apocalypse tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on MSNBC.